Hello, everyone. Welcome to our October community gathering. I'm Ellie Halen, president of HumanistsMN. For any new visitors or members here today, we are so glad to have you here. If you're new to humanism, I'd just like to do a little crash course. HumanistsMN is a secular community for ethical living, committed to the well-being of all and sustainability of the planet. We are a home for those looking for a community of naturally curious, compassionate, and rational people. And in short, we believe that you can be good without a God. And for newcomers, perhaps confused by the pew situation here, pews are not our thing. First Unitarian Society is a humanist congregation that essentially functions like a church for free thinkers, humanists, and atheists. So hence the traditional vibe of the space. But I did hear a rumor that the seating in here might be changing. So something to look forward to if you're not feeling that. HMN is a very active organization. We organize primarily through Meetup. So feel free to join us there so you can see the wide variety of upcoming events that we have this fall. We are an all-volunteer nonprofit, and we depend on the service and generosity of our members and friends to serve our mission. We have many volunteer opportunities such as marketing, media and tech, membership, programming, and social action. So please feel free to reach out to me or Audrey Kingstrom, our program coordinator, during the social hour. We'd be happy to talk with you about those opportunities. You can also get involved by going to our website, humanistsmn.org, to learn more about us or explore opportunities to get involved. And there you can also support us by becoming a dues-paying member. Just a bit of housekeeping. Restrooms are out to the left down the hall or downstairs and to the left. After the speaker and Q&A session, we have the social hour that I mentioned at 4:30. Please feel free to stay and socialize. We will be providing food and drinks, and we encourage you to please consider contributing with a donation to help us cover the costs. Up next, Christine Retqua with our social action team.
Thank you, Ellie. I'm pleased to be here with you all. I am co-chair of our Humanists in Action Committee. We work on advocating for the values of humanism, such as with the legislature or regulatory methods or other rallies, because there's never a shortage of need to advocate for humane values. The other part we do is community service. And that is one thing that I hear from some people who have been associated with religious groups. That's something that they're concerned about not having available to them. So I'm pleased that we offer throughout the year multiple opportunities to serve in the community. And if you do that, you, as a dues-paying member, will get one of the cool shirts. Let you read the back of this one. That is the value I most believe in, human kindness. And that is what I think that we can bring. Pleased to offer these opportunities to you all. Two I will mention coming up. One is an ongoing activity. We are sponsoring a Ukrainian refugee family, a younger couple with a 4.5-year-old child. They're kind of in the middle phase of getting toward independence, interviewing for jobs. The little girl is now enrolled in preschool, which she goes when she has particular way of drop-off happening, like a normal child, right? The other thing I'll mention I'm going to create a bunch of meetups for is for Free Bikes for Kids organization. Every fall, they take in donor bikes, and then volunteers prep them. It can just be cleaning them. But if you're a really good bike mechanic, they want you too. So please watch for those opportunities. Lots of ways to help in our community to do good. And I will now turn it over to Audrey Kingstrom, our program coordinator. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And just to fill you in on what else is happening, of course, go to our Meetup site. That's where we advertise all our events. But we bring in special guest speakers most months. And next month at our community gathering, which is what we call this event that you're here at right now, we have invited Keith Ellison, Attorney General of Minnesota, and he will be here. But caveat, he was not available on the third Saturday, which is the Saturday we usually have our guest speaker series. He's available on the second Saturday. So November 11th, mark your calendars. Keith Ellison will be here to talk about ending the cycle of police violence. And Suzanne, am I right? He has a book out, and he will be promoting his book as well, and probably signing it. So do be here for on November 11th, the second Saturday. So some of our other programming is being switched up a little bit to accommodate Keith Ellison. And then in December, we're not bringing in a guest speaker because on the third Saturday, December 16th, we will be celebrating the winter solstice. And we have a dinner. It's instead of the afternoon, it's 5 o'clock, and we will be over at the Humanities Center in St. Paul, where some of you who are longtime members know that we've been over there before. But that's where we'll be for our festive dinner and festivities, programming, etc. A fun time. And next year, come January, we have some wonderful programs lined up for next year as well. So keep an eye out for these programs, as well as our regular ongoing programming that you will see all the time, whether it's service, community work, advocacy work, or just getting together for fun. Anyway, good to see you all today. Oh, and now Suzanne, who will introduce our speaker.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Suzanne Perry. I'm on the board of HumanistsMN, and I'm really thrilled to be able to introduce our speaker today. I subscribe to the Washington Post, and earlier this year, I saw this headline: "In America, you have to opt out of religion in public life. That's backward." And I thought, right on, who wrote that? And I discovered it was Kate Cohen, who's a contributing columnist for the Post. So I started watching for her byline, and since then her headlines have included things like, "Why are we so tolerant of churchy bigotry?" and "Taxpayers shouldn't be paying for religious schools." Most recently, she did a big article titled, "America doesn't need more God, it needs more atheists." And that generated 12,000 comments. Kate says she doesn't read the comments, but I can tell her that most, if not, or I should say many, if not most, were very positive, because I think people are hungry for conversations about the outsized role of religious dogma in political life. Kate, who lives on a farm in Albany, New York, has just published a book, "We Have Little Faith: Why I Stopped Pretending to Believe, and Maybe You Should Too." She's also an essayist, a writer of documentary scripts, and the author of 2 previous books. Kate will be signing "We Have Little Faith" during the social hour that follows this presentation. I encourage you to buy one for yourself or any other shy atheists you might know for a bargain price of $20. We will be taking questions after Kate's presentation. For now, let's give a warm welcome to Kate Cohen.
Hello. Okay, how's that? Okay, you'll tell me. Thank you, Suzanne, for inviting me to speak to this beautiful community in this beautiful city. It's my first time. Thank you all for coming out today. My talk, as you probably know, is titled, "Are You an Atheist? Then America Needs You to Say So." And you would think that the first half of this talk, the yes-no question, could be dispensed with rather quickly. Do you believe that there is a supernatural being in charge of the universe? No? You're done. Seems pretty simple. But for many of us, it doesn't feel that simple. It certainly didn't feel simple to me. I was raised Reformed Jewish in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. We went to synagogue, lit the Sabbath candles almost every Friday night, and my sisters and I were all bat mitzvah. I don't know what you know about the Jewish liturgy, but it's mostly just direct praise of a supreme being. Whether it's regular Saturday or a rite of passage or a holiday, you're pretty much saying, "Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe," over and over. And then you swap out the thing that you're praising him for. Candles, wine, the Torah, escape from Egypt. It's all praise of a supreme being. And the thing is, I never really believed in that supreme being. I never believed someone, let alone the villainous hero of the Old Testament, was listening to me pray. Looking back now, I see that I thought of God as a central character in one of the most popular books ever written. Here's how I put it in We Have Little Faith. I was a reader. My whole family were readers, and my father taught Shakespeare for a living. To me, God was the same as any fascinating literary character with one big difference. When we talked about Prince Hamlet or King Lear, we also talked about the playwright who created him. Whereas when we talked about God, there was no explicit acknowledgement that an author was involved, that God was made up. I guess I assumed that's how my parents felt, and maybe they assumed that's how their children felt too. They never invoked God outside of ceremonial settings, never suggested we pray for anything, and never referred to Jewish law to keep their children in line. But honestly, I never asked them if they believed in God. And no one, not my relatives visiting for Passover, my Sunday school teachers supervising the construction of sugar cube models of the Second Temple, or the rabbis preparing me to become a Jewish adult, ever asked me. We of Little Faith is about telling the truth. And most of part one is about how I totally did not do that. For years, as do many, many, many people, I simply went along with what was going on around me, with what my parents did and said, which, as I note, may or may not have been what they actually believed. I think about that sometimes now. I picture myself as a child in synagogue, sitting in a pew, looking around at everyone else, assuming they were actually worshiping during worship service instead of letting their minds wander like me. How many of them didn't believe either? We don't really know how many atheists there are in America. We know that about 4% of Americans, at last count, have called themselves atheists in a survey. We know that between 19 and 26% of Americans have told pollsters that they don't believe in God. We know that at least a small percentage of people who affiliate with a religion, who call themselves Catholic or Protestant or Jewish or Methodist, also say they don't believe in God. We know that only 49% of Americans believe in the God of the Bible, and we know that at least some of the nuns, the fast-growing group of Americans who aren't affiliated with any religion, do believe in God of some kind. One reason the statistics are so murky is that asking people to say they're atheist is asking them to tell people they're a sort of person that people don't like. Atheists don't get a lot of positive press. Polls show that Americans don't trust us, don't want to vote for us, and don't want their children to marry us. Studies show that even atheists think hypothetical serial killers are likely to be atheists. We're suspicious of ourselves. People are reluctant to tell other people they are atheists because of that stigma. They don't want to be thought of as immoral or amoral. I personally wanted people to like me. Maybe you do too. but they're also reluctant to tell themselves they're atheists because they think being an atheist is more complicated than it really is. So before you answer the question, are you an atheist? I want to talk about what being an atheist requires and what it does not. Let's start with one of the basics. Number one, you don't have to be a man to be an atheist. It's true. Picture an atheist. Not me. That's cheating. Most people think of Richard, Dan, Sam, or Christopher, or the funny ones, Ricky and Bill. In fact, more men than women do identify as atheists. But I think that's because women face more pressure to get along with others, to be the social glue that holds everything together. Or they think that being an atheist is a male thing to do. But you don't need to be male or even to possess any stereotypically male characteristics to be an atheist. You don't have to have a fatherly beard or a big brotherly sneer. You don't have to be aggressive or argumentative, even if you are a man. You don't have to be ready and willing to lecture other people on how dumb religion is, or conversely, on how they're doing atheism wrong. Please don't do that. Number two, you don't have to give up joy and love and puppies. Atheists can be whole people. We can feel gratitude, just like believers. We can be guided by a strong sense of right and wrong. We can feel awe as we look out at the world. We can feel blessed to be alive in it. We can feel hope for the future, and we can even have faith in other people. Some people say they believe in God because they believe in wonder and in a kind of cosmic oneness that reveals itself to them in coincidences or in good fortune. That's not believing in a supreme being, though. That's having big feelings about big things and giving those feelings the biggest word we have for it in this culture, God. But they're still atheists. Number three, you don't have to study to be an atheist, or even be very bright, for that matter. That's a misconception. You don't have to know how the universe began or what the meaning of life is. You can reject belief in God as the answer to these questions without first coming up with other ones. Now, if you were trying to convince me to believe something, yes, the burden of proof would rest with you. If you were trying to convince me to pray to a supreme being I can't see, or make laws based on the wishes of a deity as conveyed in a book of uncertain origin, well, then you might have some explaining to do. If not, though, you're allowed just to look around at what other people believe and say, that seems made up. Being an atheist doesn't mean signing up for debate. All atheists should practice saying, no, I don't believe that, or no thanks, or no, nah, nope. If someone asks you how the Big Bang happened, you can say, I don't know. You're not required to say why you don't believe in the one creation story someone is telling you out of all the possible creation stories. You can just say, oh, a story. Back to my story for a second. As I said, I was raised Reformed Jewish, and I acted Reformed Jewish all the way up through my Jewish wedding. I didn't join a synagogue as a young adult, but that's pretty common. A lot of young people don't return to their houses of worship until they have kids. And then they feel that to be good parents, they have to raise their children in a religion. For me, it was the opposite. Instead of making me seek the faith of my upbringing, having children made me realize, finally, that I didn't want to pass along to my children things I didn't believe. And I didn't believe God was anything other than a very popular human invention. So that is what I told them. I'll read you that scene. The chapter is called Thunderbolt. I can tell you the exact moment when I started to raise my children as atheists. It didn't feel momentous at the time, but it was a moment. Noah was 5, Jesse was 3, and we were sitting on the couch reading from D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths, a holdover from my childhood bookshelf. Those illustrations freaked me out as a kid. It's one thing to read that Cronus ate his babies, but it's quite another to see it. So naturally, I had to share the experience with my boys. Anyway, one of the boys asked what a myth was, and I told them it was a story about how the world works. People used to believe that these gods were in charge of what happened on Earth, and these stories helped explain things they didn't understand, like winter, or stars, or thunder. See, look, I flipped ahead to find a picture. Zeus has a thunderbolt. They don't believe them anymore? No, I said. That's why they call it myth. When people still believe it, they call it religion. Like the stories about God and Moses that we read at Passover, or the ones about Jesus and Christmas. They're just made-up stories, like myths, but people still believe them. Here's how the D'Aulaire's book begins. In olden times, when men still worshipped ugly idols, there lived in the land of Greece a folk of shepherds and herdsmen who cherished light and beauty. They did not worship dark idols like their neighbors, but created instead their own beautiful, radiant gods. Every people creates its own gods, I said. The little warm bodies nodded, and we proceeded to Gaia and the Titans until I could feel Cronus lurking behind the next page. That was it, the big moment. I didn't set out to raise atheists per se. Before I had children, I certainly never planned to tell my children that religions were made up. I planned to read to them all the time and feed them food I made myself and make sure they wrote thank you notes. That was about it, except for one more thing. I planned to tell them the truth. God is made up. That's what I told my kids. Note that I didn't say some people think God is made up. No one knows for sure. This is because of number 4. Atheists don't have to be any more certain that God does not exist than they are that monsters don't exist. Being an atheist does not require a higher standard of proof or certainty. There's no way to prove there's no God, right? Since he's supposed to be invisible and intangible and work mysteriously, especially during earthquakes and school shootings, you can't disprove his existence. Some people feel intellectually dishonest calling themselves atheists in the absence of proof there's no God. I accidentally wrote there's no Gog. There's no Gog either, for the record. They're reluctant to say there's no God because it seems the same, logically, as saying there is a God. It's an argument from faith. But they're not reluctant to say there is no little green Martian guy. There's no swamp thing. There's no fairy godmother. To be an atheist, you don't have to be any more certain about the non-existence of God than you are about the non-existence of other imaginary creatures. This is from a chapter called, Sorry, Honey, Gods Just Pretend. One day, in the middle of doing her math homework at age 9, after having heard a casual remark I made to her father, Lena, our youngest, paused, pencil poised, to ask me the obvious, but as yet never asked question. How do we know there's no God? It's a question atheists get asked all the time, often by people who think we should use that gentler term, agnostic, people who are comfortable with doubt and suspicious of certainty. In answer, I would say that all evidence points to the fact that God is a popular and useful fiction, and that no evidence points to the fact that he actually exists. But how do we know? Where's the evidence that he doesn't exist? That's what Lena was asking for. That's what leaves many people wary of leaving the agnostic camp. And it's what makes many parents, even those willing to call themselves atheists, decline to issue definitive statements to their children. Even people who accept my atheism with a shrug object to the idea that I teach my children there is no God. No one taught me to be an atheist. After all, I came to my own conclusions. Shouldn't my children get the opportunity to assess the facts and decide for themselves? The fact that only one of my 3 children ever challenged me on this point underscores the great and awesome power of the parent. How can these kids possibly decide for themselves when their all-powerful mom has decided for them? It's true. I stacked the deck. There's always the chance my children will experience a late-life conversion, but like smoking, belief in the supernatural is a habit far less likely to be picked up by adults than by kids. Chances were good that teaching my kids there was no God would likely result in their not believing in God. I can't prove God does not exist. So how can I teach my children as fact something that cannot actually be proven? Isn't that intellectually irresponsible? Well, I can't prove that monsters don't exist either, but I have no trouble saying to my kids, monsters are pretend. What, after all, is the alternative? Mommy, are monsters real? Well, honey, I don't believe monsters are real, and neither does your father. Certainly, we've never seen one, but a lot of people do believe they are real. What do you think? Of course not. Monsters are pretend. No one would accuse me of indoctrinating my children with a non-belief in monsters or of brainwashing them with my skepticism about the paranormal. And yet, that's precisely what happens when the subject is God. So what's the difference? One friend has suggested that because monsters are scary, it's okay to act certain about them. Leaving the monster question unresolved doesn't do anyone any good and might result in some sleepless nights for all concerned. On the other hand, children might think it's nice to believe in heaven or God or fairies, so parents should leave open those more pleasant possibilities. She has a point. Belief in God seems harmless enough. What's the harm in imagining that a kindly old man runs the world? There is none, as long as they know it's not actually true. Being able to tell fact from fiction comes in quite handy in life, personally and politically, and at least one study has shown that kids who are raised with religion can't do that as well as kids who are raised without it. So sure, let's imagine great-grandma looking down at us from heaven, but let's be clear, we are making that up. And because our surrounding culture tells us over and over that heaven might be true, we have to be extra clear that the heaven scenario is no more plausible than the idea that great-grandma's spirit has been distilled in a bottle of scotch. When the kids are old enough, they can have a sip. Or that great-grandma now haunts the 793s of the public library. Where in the Dewey Decimal System would they like to be filed? Let's leave the poor dead lady alone for a minute as we pause to imagine that world events are directed by the seemingly random path a ladybug takes down the sidewalk. It's okay. Not just okay, mind-expanding, pleasurable to think about those things, to picture an alternate universe and ponder its metaphorical significance. I'm happy to do that and happy for my kids too. But I would never say such speculative flights of fancy are or even might be factually true. And I would never say that of heaven or God either. Just as I would never say it could be that a ladybug is in charge, one day you can decide for yourself, I would never say I don't think God is in charge, but who knows? I taught my children there is no God, or to be more accurate, I taught them that there are lots and lots of gods, all of them fascinating and all of them invented by human beings. If you're really not sure, if you really think it's possible that there's a supernatural being in charge of the universe, then fine, call yourself an agnostic, a not-knower. But if you think the actual existence of God is only monster level possible, then I assure you, you know enough. You know there is no concrete evidence of God's existence, and you know there is a vast diversity of myths, religions, and deities across time and cultures. You know people want God to exist. That shouldn't stop you from looking out at the world and saying to yourself, this God thing seems made up. And if you ever receive evidence to the contrary, then by all means, change your mind. Number 5. There's 7, just so you know. Being an atheist doesn't have to be a cause, a job, or even a hobby. I'm going to read a little bit about that. Even people who are clear in their own minds about the fact that God is made up may avoid calling themselves atheists because it seems like so much work. Your presumed atheistic responsibilities are extremely time-consuming. After you complain to the school board about the daily recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance and sue the town for its pre-meeting prayer policy, you have to picket a Christmas display, debate a Jesuit, carefully restamp all the "In God We Trust" mottos on your paper money with E pluribus unum, and try to convince your grandmother not to go to church. It's a full-time job. Atheist even sounds like a career. What's up with the kids? Well, Janie is a nutritionist now, and Abby just got certified as an atheist. She has her own practice down in the city. Even I, the person standing up here making a speech about being an atheist, the person who wrote this book, am capable of going whole days without thinking about the fact that God is a human invention. You are a politically active crowd, constantly working to better yourselves and the world. I promise you that being an atheist does not add to your to-do list. Number 6. As an atheist, you are not required to think that religion is dumb or evil or responsible for all that is wrong with the world. I have written columns on why a Christian school should not receive a public school charter, on how I don't understand why religious belief should be a get-out-of-laws-free card, on why people seem to think it's fine for religious organizations to discriminate, and on and on and on. Thank you, Washington Post. And even I don't think religion is necessarily a bad thing. I kind of like pews. What's bad is the special deference we give it, the way we allow people to use it to hurt other people. But people also use religion to help other people. People use it to organize their lives connect with one another, console themselves. I am sympathetic to that. A good half of We of Little Faith looks at everything people get or think they get from religion and examines how atheists can replace them. Religion is a human invention, but it was invented for a reason, for several reasons. Not all of them to oppress women and sanctify the status quo. There are countless reasons why people are part of a religion other than, and sometimes even in spite of, the supernatural elements, writes Phil Zuckerman in Society Without God. Wanting to please people, this is me, not him, get along with others, avoid offense or hubris, all of that. Being reluctant to contradict what everyone in the world seems to believe is true, that too. But there's more. Often they think religion is the only way to get and to give their children the things they need or want in life, including answers to our most urgent and confusing questions. How do we console ourselves in the face of our mortality? Should we make new holidays when the old ones don't fit? How do we learn right from wrong? Do we even need whatever it is people find in a house of worship? Can atheists pray, or is that crazy? What do we do about rites of passage that originate in a faith we don't believe in? And what do we get when we give up the notion of a higher power? Why do people want religion at all, asks sociologists Rodney Stark and Roger Fink in Acts of Faith. They want it because religion is the only plausible source of certain rewards for which there is an inexhaustible demand. But I'm here to tell you that it's not. Religion is not the only source, not even close. So the second part of my book, the part that is leading into, talks about all the things that religion gives to people or promises to give to people, and how atheists can get them too, as parents, but also just as human beings. I think those chapters are a lot of fun. I get to joke about death and make up prayers. I get to quote everything from Hamlet to Bull Durham, from Epicurus to C.S. Lewis to Simone Biles. And though I do come to conclusions, I'm also very understanding about how hard it is to get through life, to raise kids, to get along with your family, and also how comforting and pleasurable some aspects of religion can be. So my final item on the list of rules atheists don't have to follow is number 7. You don't have to give up Christmas. For a book by an atheist Jew, We of Little Faith has a lot of Christmas in it, because I love Christmas, but also because Christmas is a kind of shorthand for the culturally religious soup we all live in, and the questions that raises. How do we live in the world? How do we relate to our neighbors? Honestly, I think it's okay to put up a tree to celebrate the birthday of a deity you don't believe in. It's okay to sing the hymns at a funeral mass. It's okay to make matzo ball soup at Passover, even if you think the book of Exodus is gruesome. Being an atheist does not mean taking a vow of purity or even consistency. Okay, so let's recap. You don't have to be a man. You don't have to give up joy or wonder. You don't have to have a PhD in evolutionary biology. You don't have to be more sure there's no God than you are sure there are no vampires. You don't have to do atheism like it's a job or a hobby. You don't have to hate religion. You don't have to give up Christmas or other family traditions. You can even be a humanist. All you have to do to be an atheist is believe there is no supernatural being in charge of the universe. It is that simple. Okay, so now that you're all atheists, we can talk about why America needs you to say so. When I first started writing We of Little Faith over a decade ago, I was really making an argument for people to be honest with one another in their personal lives, for parents to be honest with their children, or children to be honest with their parents. For me, it was such a relief to talk to my kids about the big questions in life without having to pretend I thought there was or might be a heaven, or there was or might be God. We could face the confusion and the dread and the joys of life together. Not only that, but the more I gathered the courage to tell people outside my family that I was an atheist, the more I found that people responded with stories about their own doubts or lack of faith or religious upbringing. I had been hiding the truth because I was afraid of cutting myself off from other people, afraid of disconnecting. But telling the truth turned out to be an incredible path to human connection. But again, that would be for you. I'm talking about what would help America. As the years passed, and as right-wing Christianity tightened its grip on our laws and our courts, I became more and more convinced that our cultural habit of deferring to religion, granting legal carve-outs to religious institutions, listening to politicians talk about God and the Bible, politely acting as if we all more or less believed in a higher power, was a habit we needed to break. America needs atheists to say we're atheists, because the more we do, the more atheists we inspire to do the same. The more we say, and make it normal to say, that God is just pretend, the more we push back against the idea that God should have anything to do with public policy or public money, that my neighbor's religious belief should have any effect on me. There may be more nuns in America than ever before. People may be leaving their churches in droves, but religion is at the same time claiming and gaining an astonishing amount of political power. As I wrote in my most recent column for the Post, that's a problem, because peel back the layers of discrimination against LGBTQ+ people, and you find religion. Peel back the layers of control over women's bodies, from dress codes that punish girls for male desire, all the way to the Supreme Court striking down Roe v. Wade, and you find religion. Sometimes you don't have to peel very far. According to the bill itself, Missouri's total abortion ban was created in recognition that Almighty God is the author of life. Don't say gay laws, laws denying trans kids medical care, school library book bans, all motivated by religion. And when religion loses a fight and progress wins instead, religion then claims it's not subject to the resulting laws. Religious belief is more and more at the state. Whoops. I don't have an end. That can't be. Oh, here we go. Religious belief is more and more at the state and federal levels a way to sidestep advances the country makes in civil rights, human rights, and public health. In 45 states and the District of Columbia, parents can get religious exemptions from laws that require school children to be vaccinated. These are laws that are supposed to be saving lives. 7 states allow pharmacists to refuse to fill contraceptive prescriptions because of their religious beliefs. Every business with a federal contract has to comply with federal non-discrimination rules unless It's a religious organization. Every employer that provides health insurance has to comply with the Affordable Care Act's contraceptive mandate, unless it's, say, a craft supply store with Christian owners. Case by case, law by law, our country's commitment to the first right enumerated in our Bill of Rights, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, is faltering. The Supreme Court has ruled that the citizens of Maine have to pay for parochial school, that a high school football coach should be free to lead a prayer on the 50-yard line, that a potential wedding website designer can reject potential same-sex clients. This past summer, Oklahoma approved the nation's first publicly funded religious school. This fall, Texas began allowing schools to employ clergy members in place of guidance counselors. Good people who believe in God can and do fight all of that. I was just in Madison for the Freedom from Religion Foundation conference, and I had the honor of hearing Amanda Tyler with Christians Against Christian Nationalism talk about how Christian nationalism is both anti-democratic and anti-Christian. Clergy in Missouri and in Florida have sued over abortion bans on the grounds that they violate the religious freedom of faiths with different views of conception and abortion. In Texas, more than 100 school chaplains signed a letter opposing the law that allows schools to hire them in place of counselors. They said, no, that's not appropriate. This is great. This is tremendous, and we cannot win these fights without our fellow fighters who are believers. You don't have to be a non-believer. You don't have to be an atheist. You don't have to be a humanist to believe that Christian nationalism is a threat, to believe in the separation of church and state. I am thrilled that those people are on our side, and I believe that those fights are more important than what they think the supernatural structure of the universe might be, or the metaphysical structure of the universe might be. That's not as important. It doesn't affect people as much on a day-to-day basis as getting religion out of our laws. But I think that there is another angle that we should pursue. Beyond the arguments about what's really Christian, beyond trying to get our courts to be convinced that religious freedom means freedom from other people's religion. There's another angle, and it's an angle that atheists are the only ones who can really pursue. I think there are far more atheists in America than we think, far more people who simply don't believe there's a supernatural being in charge of the universe. And I believe that saying so to ourselves, to our neighbors, to our friends, to our representatives, and to pollsters will ultimately help push religion back out of our schools, our hospitals, our FDA approval process, and our laws. For America's sake, we need more Americans who are willing to look at the pervasive, culturally dominant idea of a supreme being and say, nah, it seems made up.
Thank you so much, Kate. We are going to be taking questions. If people could line up here at the microphone.
Please.
There we go.
Thank you very much. I love your comments. I don't know, Suzanne, if anyone shared with Kate about our Day of Reason at the legislature, so that's on that line. One thing I think about is one reason people struggle with atheists or atheism, they think, where do you get your values from?
Yeah.
And what I think is that humans have known forever that we have to treat each other kindly and respectfully. What are 6 of the commandments related to? It's about respecting the other person. We know how to do this. We don't need a religious text. That's what I think. What do you think, or have you had that discussion with anyone? What do you think?
Yes. Yeah, and I will say that the other 4 commandments are completely useless. Yes, so that's one of the chapters in the second part of the book is a big question that atheists get is, where do you get your morality if you don't get it from religion? And I think even people who don't believe in God, that's one of the reasons they think they're sort of supposed to raise their kids in a religion, because at least it has a moral framework. So I really enjoy that working on that chapter, because the first thing I do is dispense with the notion that that religious people get their morality from their religion. I don't think they do. And I think that it's very easy to show that they don't, because all you have to do is show that they ignore some parts of their religious tradition and they focus on other parts. Their Bible verses that they don't pay any attention to, and Bible verses that they think are the most important ones. And you know good Christians who quote the parts of the Bible that really accord with humanist values, and you know bad Christians, I'll just say it, who quote the parts that are all about discriminating against other people. So it's all in there, and I think where morality comes from, I totally agree with you. I believe that we have an innate sense of justice and of empathy with other people. And I talk about a concept that I completely made up called the rule of how would you feel, which is the golden rule by another name. But basically, yeah, I think that's what we all use. And so it's an interesting question, the evolutionary basis of morality and why people have that inside them. That's an interesting question. But there's no distinction between people raised without religion and people raised with religion in terms of morality, or in terms of their of right and wrong. So it's a fun chapter.
Thank you. Apart from the prospects of having more people in this country come out as atheists,
Yeah.
an alternative, and would address some of the concerns that you've raised and I agree with about religion and government, politics and the laws, an alternative would be what's called secularism, or at least a notion of secularism that says you separate your religious views from social life, from political life, that religious beliefs have no standing in public affairs.
Right.
And so, and there are politicians who've done this. John Kerry, when he's running for president in 2004, he was a Catholic. He personally, as a Catholic, wouldn't agree with abortion, but he said, as a politician, he couldn't let his religious views affect his views on abortion. And so he supported abortion rights. So my question is, in your opinion, what do you think are the prospects for this country becoming more secular in that sense, accepting the idea that, yeah, you have your personal religious beliefs, but when you come to the public realm and we're talking about laws and government, those religious beliefs don't have standing. They don't justify arguments in that realm. Are there any hope of that?
I mean, thank you for that question. I think that that's the way it should be. That's the way, that is the sort of neutral or default away from which we seem to be moving, which is terrifying to me. And that is one of the reasons that I, sort of take this more in the face, I guess you would say, sort of atheist stand, because I think sort of appealing to the original standard of secularism doesn't seem to be working. On the hopeful side is the fact that Christian nationalists, with all the power that they have gained, are really overreaching. And I think that we might see a backlash against, it's very clear how they are really, if we're going to go from abortion back again to same-sex marriage and litigate that, and then to contraception. People are, I think, beyond communities even beyond communities like this, people are beginning to understand that their lives can really be affected by other people's religious beliefs. So I guess I'm hopeful. I'm devastated at the loss of life that's going to happen in the meantime. The girls and women who cannot have control over their own bodies, who are being forced to have children. But I'm hopeful that people are finally going to see, and that will have an effect at the ballot box and will shift back. So.
When you're thinking about can you hear me okay? Oh, you can probably hear me.
Yes, I can.
When you're thinking about the Christian nationalist stuff, it's almost from the standpoint of like a moral high ground, but I think it's actually an immoral use, but it's almost like hijacking a front of morality in the cover of religion. But when we see a lot of hypocrisy in it, that it's actually not living out any of the tenets of things. So I just it's perplexing to me, and so it's just I feel like there can be things that happen when I think about our kids. I think about like being anti-fundamental, versus like, let's say anti-religion or something. Because I think if you're not fundamental, then you can like really just
you can take in information, you can change.
Yeah. And I think we can see fundamentalism from like in lots of categories that aren't even religious,
Right.
And to be so hardlined where then now it's like it becomes an evil versus good kind of thing, when we're all just people trying to like, So I don't know if you have any thoughts in that kind of meandering.
I will say that I've met and had great discussions because of this book with people who are believers, and it is so fascinating to me and apparent to me when I talk to them that they, back to your point again, they bring their morality to their religion. They bring their morality to the God. And the gods that these people, with whom I'm sort of entirely politically aligned, right? I've met some incredible people working on the left, progressive people fighting Christian nationalism. The God that they describe is wonderful. It's just like them, and it really is. That's how I feel. It's like, oh, this is how you would be. This is how you are, and it's clear that then there's the other side, right? There's people who make God in their image, in their prejudiced, fearful, bigoted image, and it's shocking to me that those people have gained as much power as they have. In terms of the hypocrisy, I leave that again. I sort of leave that to Christians to say that's not Christian, or but I totally agree with you. but that's also you're a good person too, right? So that's also your reading of the scripture. You know, it's your reading. So yeah, I think your kids are lucky to have that perspective of being open to information and not to be rigid. But I think it's also about not being evil. So there's both things. Hi.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. You touched on inhibiting federal funds or educational funds for charter schools or Christian charter schools, which I love that you brought that up. And I believe you said you had written about that in your columns beyond this book. So do you have any advice for us average citizens, other than who we vote for and writing to those legislators, how we can be more active in that particular issue?
In terms of vouchers?
Just what else can we as average citizens do to really work towards avoiding that, keeping those funds away from Christian schools? I care about that issue, but I need to educate myself better.
Yes,
so any advice you have is appreciated.
I mean, I think I need to educate myself more too. I was sort of really calling attention to what was happening in Oklahoma and making the point that I don't think is made very often, that you know, it's not just that religious schools, I mean, you start by giving religious institutions exemptions from anti-discrimination laws. Then you give them public funds, and then you're in a position as a society of funding the very discrimination that you have outlawed. You know, so that is a point that I think other people had made. I also tried to make the point that you're not educating children. If you know that, let's remember that a lot of things that you learn in a religious school are not fact, and that religious schools not only go against the Oklahoma Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, but the actual, you know, education law that says you have to educate children. I'm not answering your question, obviously, because I guess what I would say is
you're doing great.
I don't know specifics. I would say I do believe being out as an atheist, making it very clear that these are not, you know, this is a made-up structure, and there's no more reason to have a law based on God's will than based on, you know, Peter Pan's will or something like that. So I think being vocal is going to help, but for specifics, I have to look up what I think you could do. I think Andrew Seidel would be a good person to look up. He's very strong on vouchers, so I would follow him. Sure.
Hey, well, I enjoyed your talk.
Good.
I've been an out-of-the-closet atheist for 40 years.
All right.
And I've had two main reasons, and I wanted to know what you thought of them. First of all, when I was thinking of what to call myself, any other word you use, humanist, freethinker, rationalist, agnostic, a religious person can claim all those words. The one word they won't claim is atheist. And the second the second reason was that if you cheerfully say, oh yeah, I'm an atheist, you've already called yourself the worst thing that they can think to call you. You've disarmed them. They can't.
Yeah.
You know. So what did you think of those?
I think that's interesting. People have asked me, you know, are you concerned that people are going to think you're going to hell? And I say, I'm Jewish. People have been thinking I'm going to hell my entire life, so that is totally fine. No, I think you're right. I think the other thing for me about it, you've called yourself the worst thing they can call you, I guess. Although, yes, I guess that's worse than being Jewish. But but also for me, in my position, you know, I live on a farm, I'm a mom, I was in the PTA, I was, you know, I'm a very nice person, you know, whatever, polite. I also feel like it's my job. I live in New York State. I have liberal friends. My parents are, you know, whatever, fine with whatever I do. It's my job as a person who has those privileges to call myself an atheist, because there are people in this country who would be risking their careers, who might be risking bodily injury, who are, you know, risking their children's friends or whatever it is. For the people who can't, for people who live in a different situation, who are more enmeshed, I feel like it's like particularly a responsibility for me to say atheist. Because yes, it's the worst thing, but I can do it without much fear of reprisal.
Hi.
Hi.
So you asked people to out themselves. I've been out since I was about 14 or so. I've always been interested in science, and I immediately decided to become a physics major. And one of the things that I've noticed applies like in multiple patterns of places is Newton's third law, but also like electromagnetism. Wherever there's one thing going one direction, there's something pushing back going the other direction. And as a child who had a really amazing high school education, I was very privileged to have it. Now it was Protestant, it was interdenominational, as they said, so it was Christian, which was amazing because their goal was to teach us to think for ourselves.
Wow.
Most of the people there are Catholic. A few were Lutheran. And because I had that aspect of being able to think for myself, I went through reading everything. Like, we read every philosopher, and we read the Summa Theologica, and I said, I'm an atheist. They wanted us to challenge our beliefs because they believed that after you did it, you would come back believing it stronger. But being able to be presented with formal logic classes and topology and set theory as a 11th and 12th grader, I was able to come to different conclusions. Now, when I say the irony and the outing of myself is that my mother is the head of an organization. She is very Catholic. She has her master's degree in Catholic Studies from St. Thomas, and she regularly lectures to clergy, to archbishops. This is my daily life. She's created this organization. It's actually pretty nice as an organization. It's just that everything about her life is religion, and everything about my family's life is religion. My brother's wife, and again, I apologize, you can throw tomatoes at me or whatever you want to. I wish there was something I could do, but the closer you are to the chaos in somebody's mind, the harder it is to actually have a conversation with them, which is why I love this event, because having a broader perspective and a public pressure instead of it being individuals within their families trying to convert somebody. So here's the deal. My brother's mother-in-law is the head of Pro-Life of America. All those billboards all over the place, those are my nieces and nephews and or their friends. Like when it says real love, men loves babies, like some of those billboards are my brother. Now on top of that, my son, I raised him to experience everything with the intention that I would bring him to all the different faiths and let him decide, but also telling him what I believed at the same time, but doing all of it. I thought the same thing, let him experience all of it and then choose. In the end, what he saw in our culture is that people who are religious make more money and have more privileges in the world and have more community and connection. And he ended up being inculcated by my family, and now he has chosen to be religious. He has not only like joined their faith and been confirmed, he became an altar boy, and now he's going to a very Catholic high school, like so Catholic that nuns live on the site, Catholic. Like, Yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Anyhow, so I in the course of all of this, and as I've been exploring my own like journey of exploration, I've gotten to the point that I've started studying neuroscience. And one of the things that I think is fascinating is that we actually create the way in which we interact with the world as neural manifolds, replications in our brains, and then we interact with that. So when we talk about what we can see or can't see, there's reasons that people don't see certain things because they didn't build it into their worldview. And that's why it's so easy for there to be cognitive dissonance. Anyhow, I just love the idea of there being more public pressure and more coming out and speaking about these things in rational ways, but it's also, no one's gonna win anyone over with logic. There's no logic whatsoever between what they believe. I'm also offering it if anybody wants to like talk to me after about like what some of the things are that they're actually talking about and what they're saying. I'm basically stuck now because I have to go and enmesh myself in a very, very religious world on a daily basis and not admit. Everyone who knew me prior to this knows I'm very, very atheist, but if I were to acknowledge this at my son's school, I'd be ostracized immediately, and so would he. And so I have to not do that. Oh, sorry, there are more people. Okay. Anyhow, but yes, if anyone wants to know what thoughts they're harboring, et cetera, and political ideas they have, talk to me.
Wow, that's tough. So I really feel like, the more of us who are in a position to, say what we do or do not believe, the more we should. And I also want to say, in terms of your journey, when I said that you don't have to have a PhD in evolutionary biology, and you don't have to be very bright or whatever. Of course you can, Of course you can go through it as an actual study, and I've gotten so much wonderful mail, mostly from the column, some from the book too, of people telling me how, the same kind of thing. They were given the opportunity to think about things, and they said, no, this doesn't add up to me. So, that's rough that is your family situation, though. I feel for you.
Thank you. So interesting. I really loved your talk at the beginning about what you're telling your kids, because I'm there right now. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. I was raised, Protestant. Realized early on it wasn't for me, but didn't want to speak out. But with kids, you start to think about your beliefs, don't you? And what do you want to pass on? My oldest is very logical. He accepted my line as well was, humans made up religion to explain things they didn't understand. That's exactly what I said. The 7-year-old insisted that he believed in God for a while because he goes along with what his friends do. Just the other day, he was like, you know what, Mom? I think people made up God because they didn't understand things. I was like, oh, I wonder where you got that. So I was like, yes, but I guess that's kind of an intro to saying one of the reasons religious fundamentalism has taken over is because these people are very smart, and they planted these seeds a long, long time ago. What we have to be doing now, there's a lot of hope in that the number of nuns is climbing, the number of believers in younger age groups is falling, but there's still these mega churches, and then the very powerful sense of belonging that young people particularly get from religion. So I'm just wondering if you have any insight into those trends among tweens and teens, and whether there is really a ray of hope that we can hold on to.
I think there is a ray of hope, but I do have, some caveats about it. I do think people need to gather. I do think people need to have that sense of connection. And some of the research on the nuns is about not necessarily what they're thinking, but about disaffection with religion in general, and there's been research too that nuns, Gen Z. Well, no, I won't go into Gen Z, but that nuns are not as politically active. People who are not religiously affiliated aren't necessarily politically active. And in my last column, I talk about how atheists are the most politically active. And I think that's because, like humanists, we don't think there's a higher power, and we know that if we're going to fix anything, it has to be us. Yeah, I think that the numbers are going in the right direction, and I think there's people who would argue that the sort of dwindling number of mainline Protestants or even evangelicals is part of the reason that there is a kind of backlash on their part, politically speaking, to kind of grab hold of the culture before it slips away. I'm hoping that's true.
Thank you so much for your talk. I was wondering if you could comment on your job as a columnist for the Washington Post. I heard a little bit of your story yesterday as part of the planning committee for this event. But anyway, could you speak about, are you sensing at this major publication and your editor that, I understand you write more than just about separation of church and state, but is there an interest in this? Are they welcoming your voice on this?
Yeah.
Do you sense any change that, I realize it's only one publication and it's only your experience, but can we be hopeful that the world wants to wake up to this and listen to voices like yours and people like you just bringing this to people's attention?
Yes, we can be hopeful. Partly because they really respond to, numbers. And any time that I write any column about this, and I do write about other things, like I say, atheism is not my my full-time job. But anytime I write about this topic, I get so much mail and so many comments, and I think that they do see that. Plus, I get a lot of intra-office mail, especially, to your point, from the younger people on the staff. Often when I'm talking about LGBTQ issues and the relationship between that and religion. So I think they are responding to that because people are responding to that. I have to give them credit. They've never told me not to write about it. Occasionally they want me to tone myself down, but if I say no, then they're okay with that. So yeah, it's been a really good place to work. I'm virtual. I also am sometimes horrified by my fellow columnists, and so there is an old guard. There's an old guard that will probably be around for a really long time, but they are making room for other voices. So.
I have a problem when I come to groups like this, or other groups, if you will. Some people may view as a different end of the spectrum. How do we, and we use terms like moral, good, bad, right, wrong. How do we define those terms? I don't want to tell you that religion is the way to do it, but I look at things that in my youth I fought for, like freedom of speech and so on, and I wanted Gus Hall and Mulford Q. Sibley to talk at the University of Minnesota. Was a communist and a socialist, and now the young people are not wanting other people to speak because they are immoral or bad or whatever term. And I don't know, we get in our bubble and we agree with each other on these terms. But if someone wishes to look at this objectively, what guidelines do we use? And I'm not saying that that's against atheism or for religion. I just am at a complete loss. whether Jefferson is somebody we speak and we respect, or if it's somebody that we ignore because we disagree with that part or the other. I'm at a complete loss as to where to go.
Well, I think it's complicated, and that's why it's a difficult topic for our time, I guess, because people really do enjoy oversimplifying issues. I think if you can, I think it's, for historical figures, constantly reevaluating, constantly recontextualizing, constantly acknowledging both the good and the bad, I believe, is the way to go. And I don't think it's all, I kind of disagree that it's all young people think this or that or the other. I think that there is a, I guess I sort of pull back and feel like there are extreme voices in terms of not wanting to privilege historical figures from the past who have some kinds of immoral behavior, but then there's, and I think that that's helping pull us a little bit more into reconsideration and recontextualization. I don't think it's really silencing anybody. In terms of how do you decide what's moral or not, I mean, that is the subject of a lifetime, right? That's what our conversations with our friends and our kids and our parents and our should be about, and it is even the very simple formulation of do unto others as you would have done unto you. It gets really complicated, beyond a certain point. Deciding, sort of understanding what you desire and want might be different from somebody else, and trying to figure that out. I mean, these are really complicated questions. My point is that religion does not have any particular relationship to morality, and I think you have to sort of start with that point, and then it's all of our jobs as human beings to figure the rest out.
We have time for one more question.
Okay, better be a good one.
Hi. With one of the previous questioners, the subject of what are the trends going forward, especially surrounding the nuns, are they going to grow, are they not going to grow, that kind of thing. My thought about that is that a good chunk of the nuns are very likely probably not going to be bringing rigid dogma to their children.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to greatly affect what their children think about religion and think about belief without reason. So I think the biggest reason why religion has been so strong for so many centuries is that people pass it on to their children along with dogma and unquestioning belief. And I think that is tending to go away now. So I think that's one of the trends maybe we might expect.
You might be right.
Other things are going to affect how children get their beliefs in the first place. But I think dogma passed on from their parents is going to go down.
I think you're right. I also find it very interesting, at least among my friends, that some of it isn't that dogma that's passed along. I mean, I don't think my parents really were believers exactly. It's sort of like what's passed along is the habit.
Yeah.
The habit might be getting broken. I would like to see, along with that, some honest conversations about, what it is we're talking about and what it is we believe. But I agree the habit the habits might be broken.
All right, thanks again, Kate. That was a really wonderful presentation. Thank you all for coming. And please, if you can, stay for the social hour. Thanks a lot.
I'll just add that Kate will be signing books right out that door and to the left. So please go buy a book and have her sign it.